Hey everyone, this is WISER Systems here, and we're doing yet another podcast. Some people have criticized us for not calling it a mini podcast because it's typically just 8 or 10 minutes long, but hey, it's a video and we're doing it.
Let's clarify, our engineers are criticizing us because podcasts have to be 20 minutes or longer.
Okay.
Apparently. Now we know. Now you know. Now we all know.
So we'll continue the evolution of our podcast, and just by way of introduction, I'm Seth Haller, CEO.
And I am Logan Maxwell, wearer of many hats. Right now, I am on part of the podcast team.
Exactly.
For this 20 minutes exactly.
So, here we are today. Logan has been traveling for quite a while. He has been listening, getting the voice of the customer. And, Logan, tell us what you're hearing. What is the latest that's happening? What are people interested in? And what's kind of the theme?
Sure. So to encapsulate a lot of different tangents, I think the main theme could be like simplicity. So in a functioning manufacturing facility, there's a lot of resistance to large change. There's a lot of resistance to behavioral changes of each little process, right? You have a bunch of different people that have a bunch of tasks. Big changes, big plans, big pilots, big tech, things can get really hard to implement unless they're made simple.
Okay, so let's paint the picture. We provide a real-time location system solution so that they can track things, items, WIP, equipment within a manufacturing facility.
Right.
And anytime you do an installation, the process flow, how people at site interact will change some, right? And typically, that change in general is not necessarily easy to do, right? There's some level of friction there. You have to train them, get them used to the technology, and it depends on how that technology works and how they interact with it. So when you say simplification, in that context, what does it mean?
Right. So there tends to be a way that things are done. And some manufacturing shops are much more tech forward than others. And I've been to many, many different manufacturing facilities at this point, probably over 200. And there are a lot of facilities that are all regimented in their ways. And they've got guys that have been there for 25 years that are used to doing something some way. And when it comes into our system, a lot of that tends to be, well, now you're putting something on. You have now an asset tracking device that you're going to put a little tag on. We got some right here. So you're going to put a tag on the item. That is now a behavioral change, right? So part of your process is now changing. So you need to make that as simple as you possibly can. There needs to be not a lot of additional entries, text entries.
So when you're visiting these sites and you're talking to these people, the potential customers who want to install a system, this is something they are emphasizing. Is that correct?
Right, because there's, in a lot of ways, larger organizations are going to have dedicated teams that are going to transform the organization digitally, right? So you have digital transformation, continuous improvement teams that are trying to roll out. And if you've done one, you've done two, you've done three, you know the sticking points that happen when rolling out these sorts of technologies to your staff, right?
Right.
And anything you change, there is going to be some level of training and behavioral change with any system. ERP transitions, MES transitions, workspace transitions, workstation transitions, even just changing a computer and a keyboard changes the flow of that operation. And so when you start talking about real-time location asset tracking system, it evokes
this high technology, something new, and they're like,
correct.
What do I have to do? This will be a lot of work. It'll be complicated.
And traditionally, they are correct. There is a lot of complication that comes with putting in a system like this. And so a lot of what we're doing when we're visiting these sites on the WISER side is literally walking through their process. Step one, where's the material received? Where is your receipt? And we sit at the receiving station and we talk through how this would be used in that case. And then we get all the way through, who's going to install it? What's the upkeep like? How often do you change your floor plan? And traditional RTLS systems tend to be very regimented and difficult in the way that they're set up and can be modified and be used.
So they require a lot of change by the users or the workers there. And you say traditional, which I think means it's different than what WISER is doing.
Yes. Yeah. So our thought is to try, because there's all of these things that go into a system of this magnitude. There's OT changes and IT changes. I mean, this is across everything. We've tried to make every single step simple. I know we started talking about the behavioral changes of somebody that's going to tag an asset. We have done work to make that extremely simple, but it extends beyond that into the installation of the system and the upkeep of the system, right? And we can talk. I can talk at length about any of those points if you need me to. But
the theme here, simplification.
Sure.
And we've broken it up to 3 categories. There's one, installation.
Sure.
There's on boots on the ground, worker behavioral, process oriented
use of the system. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And then the third one is
upkeep. Like
so
changes that would occur to your floor plan or your machinery. People make a lot of changes.
Okay. So floor changes of their line, for example, or they expand to an additional room or additional building or something to that effect.
Yeah,
right. So let's go through one at a time. I know we touched base a little bit on the use or the behavioral aspect of it, but why don't we take a step back and talk about the installation? Again, simplification. How does this differ from what would traditionally be done?
Right. So for an installation, we've done work on the back end to make it so the antennas, which I don't know if we have. Yeah, we do. Look at that. Right here. We've got props on hand. So these antennas have been intentionally designed to be omnidirectional, which means they don't need to be aimed or tuned. They're automatically going to set any power levels. They're automatically going to set any communication topology that they need to do. And what that means to the untrained is that you can take this and just stick it up on a wall, stick it up on a column, right? And in a real facility, that means usually the facilities and maintenance team is going to take this and do it by themselves.
Yeah. I know we've touched upon this a little bit on the previous webinar in terms of cost, but now we're focusing on the simplicity of it. So you have a wide variety of individuals who could potentially do the installation without a whole lot of training.
I like to say every site's got a Greg, right? And they call that person to cable.
A Greg. You don't have a Joe?
Or a Joe, sure. But every site has somebody they can call that has done the cabling before. And whether that person's internal or external, it's a third-party contractor. If they've done anything like APs or cameras, it's the same sort of thing. We've made it so it's daisy-chained. There's an in and an out on each of these. So you can daisy-chain one line of Ethernet through the facility and get up to 9 of these on a row. And then you can stick them up to walls and columns. And we've made it, that same algorithm, that same non-tuning omnidirectional, makes it so that when we boot the system up, if you couldn't get the lift all the way to the corner where we dictated an antenna should be, it's okay. It can be 10 feet, 20 feet in any 3 dimension, and the system will still function. And that adds a lot to simplicity.
Right. So there's definitely flexibility in how you put it up. And even if you don't get X marks the spot, the system calibrates effectively anyways. So it makes things simple, namely, who you can use to do the installation is simple, and the level, you don't need to spend a whole lot of time getting very precise. And the system is precise.
Yeah. For a good reference point is our training is typically about an hour, right? And so we don't physically have to install any of these things. We have before, but a lot of times you're going to do it yourself off an hour of training. It doesn't require any specific RF knowledge, pretty basic stuff, right? So that adds a lot to the overall simplicity of rolling out a system. That's only one of the pillars. But when you start talking about, hey, what are we going to have to do to roll this thing out? In terms of cost and simplicity, it helps a lot.
Like there was one example with a customer where they asked us, if we had an installation crew. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
And they are at a particular city. And what we did is we called a local, was it audio video installation?
Stereo, They do high-end audio, stereo stuff for home theaters and all that sort of
stuff. And that's the level of expertise that you need to do to get the system installed. So.
Yeah, and it's not to say it isn't expertise, but they don't have RF expertise. They wouldn't know anything about that, but they know how to run cable and they know how to plug things in.
And there's 10 of those in every single city.
Yes.
So if you're at all worried about installation, it's really not a problem, right?
The attempt is to make it simplified. And so anybody can install it. It's you have the time and the energy and the effort to just go up on a lift and run some Ethernet cable. And if you can't get Ethernet cable everywhere, we've added to the simplicity because you don't need Ethernet to run it.
So have you been on a lift before?
I have, many times. Yes. With fall protection and without fall protection sometimes. But
we'll have to strike that for insurance.
You can also plug this in without the Ethernet. You can just plug it into wall adapters. We have some sites that run completely that way.
So if you have access to power but not to communication or data, then you can still plug it in pretty easily.
You can. And it also means you can use solar outdoors, which is, again, very much more simple. No hardwire, no trenching underneath, burying cable. Yeah. Adds to the overall simplicity of the system from an installation point of view.
Okay, so that's installation. Let's jump to upkeep. So upkeep is, hey, the system is working. We've identified how to reconfigure our line so this is more efficient. Will that impact our our RTLS installation, or how do we change it? And will it be a big cost? Do we have to pull in a big team to change it again?
Yeah.
So that's kind of setting the stage.
Sure. So again, the same sort of algorithms that are running under the hood that determine communication topology and synchronize the mesh means that mesh is always synchronizing above your machinery. And it's doing so in a reflective environment that it knows is dynamic. And so the system is actually built to exist and operate while you move and change your machinery around.
So chaos could be happening on the manufacturing floor.
Yes.
Maybe not your manufacturing floor, but maybe others.
It's probably yours too. Yeah.
And despite all that, the system continues to operate normally and be able to locate things accurately.
Right. And anybody that's watching this that is in the market for one of these systems, whether you pick ours or not, you know your floor is going to change. You're probably in the process of a floor change this very moment while you're talking about it, because you have new machinery, you're expanding, you have organic growth. So you may be having a new building that you're putting machines in, or you have an old building that you're taking machines out of. It happens. It happens to everybody, every single shop I've been into. And so what happens when I put in a system like this? I've got all these antennas, they're pointed, they're aimed, right? That's bad news. If you have aimed antennas, directed antennas...
But that's not WISER, is that what you're
correct. Saying? That you do not want that, because you're going to be moving your machines around. And so we have a system that floats above, and as you move your machines around, you just load a new floor plan image into WISER. So the only change you make when you get a system like this is you load in a new floor plan vector or image into our platform, right? And so that's very different than having to reconfigure the physical hardware.
You don't have to get on a lift anymore, repoint the antennas.
It's one time and it's done. And it makes it so everything is much more in the software digital domain for these changes, because you can set zonal barriers. Think about an alert gets set when something moves to machine 1. What happens when I move machine 1?
Oh, no.
Right. So for other systems, that would be tied to the antenna. The antenna would have to be moved. Everything has to be reconfigured, recalibrated, and reset when you move machine 1. For WISER, when it's in the software domain, I literally click and I drag the zone over to machine 1. You know, we should
all on the computer?
We really should do it with the software up.
That would be the
next episode. We'll figure it out. But yeah, all internal to the software, you can just take and move your zones, right? In the same way that you could load a new floor plan, you're going to have new zones, and you can reconfigure those on the software domain. So you don't have to get a lift out. You don't have to have more people. It's just much more simple, to use that word too often, but it's been made to be that way.
And if there's an expansion, like say there's this space they hadn't previously occupied, they can easily just add in additional hardware, like WISER antenna devices, for example,
yes,
to that site and seamlessly integrate it to the rest of the site fairly easily.
Right. Some of our kind of core IP that obviously you're intimately familiar with is synchronizing across large campuses and sites, right? So any additional antennas don't need to necessarily require some additional calibration. We've had it so some sites some of the IT staffs that are working with us and looking over our shoulder as we set up your first site learn enough to do it themselves for the second building. And a lot of times the expansions, they'll call us and they'll have already pretty much done everything, which is great. That's fine, right? Like we don't necessarily...
A little bit of knowledge they gain from the installation where we guided them the first time around, they take that and they're able to run with that a little bit with less oversight from our side to do the installation.
It speaks to the simplicity and it speaks to the total cost of ownership. Is if you can take a little ownership, you don't have to. We can absolutely, every single time you have an expansion, log in remotely, take an hour or two, place the antennas for you and boot it up. But if you learn to do that yourself, that's even better.
So typically on an installation, we go out on site and do a walkthrough, and then we identify where the antenna devices go on the site map. But for an expansion, it could be very well the case where we don't have to go out and it can be handled remotely, and the client can do more of the installation.
There is a little bit of an art to it, but it's not rocket science. Like if you have an expansion and it's roughly a large building and your machine to ceiling ratio is about 1:2, you're going to have the same sort of grid-like structure that you had in your other buildings, right? So you just kind of rinse and repeat in that way.
Okay, so we did installation, we did upkeep, and now we touched upon behavior and use, but can we talk about concrete examples? Sure. What does on the ground the floor worker have to change in order to utilize the system? Right.
Yeah, so I'll speak. There's so many different ways the system ends up getting used.
Yeah, there's various use cases. So maybe we should choose one as an example.
I'll speak to what's a pretty common one in manufacturing is you kind of have bifurcated use of the app and bifurcated use of what you're getting out of it. So a lot of times there's going to be like the shipping and receiving station, we're dealing just with receiving at this point. They're going to be taking in new material, or they're going to be taking things out of stock. They're going to take raw material and form it into a kit. And then that kit might become a part, that part might become an assembly, and that assembly becomes finished whip, right? Throughout that process, you're going to want to associate this to that number. And so would that be on the cart where the parts are located, or what is the tag usually connected to? Totally depends on the different facilities. We've been on carts, we've been on pallets, we've been on pieces. A lot of times this gets slipped into the router.
So there's a little envelope, plastic bag with some paperwork and the tag.
And this floats with the paperwork. So we're usually, when we go on site and we look at your process, where we're starting is, where's that paperwork being made? Right? Where's the whip starting? Right. Now, I'm not talking about the use case where you're putting this on your test equipment or you're rolling bits and bobs that are going to come help you flush the whip through, right? That's very easy. Put this on, name it in our system, set it, forget it, and then whenever you need that analyzer or that calibration machine, type it in our app and go find it.
That's a separate use case.
That's kind of a separate use case because it's permanently assigned. Easy, set it, forget it. But a lot of shops have rotating whip, right? These are going to move through a flow, and you may have a nice singular loop. It starts here, it moves through all its stations, and then it gets shipped off, and we take it off, right? But there's a lot of facilities that might have 3 internal loops of raw inventory to kitting to pieces or assemblies to finished product, and each of those have a little defined loop. What starts with where the paper is made, and it ends when it gets sent off and the tag gets taken off. So that tagging and taking off needs to be simple because it's a behavioral change that's occurring. So a lot of times
there's throughout this process where the changes, there's only 2 changes that are going on. One is adding the tag at the beginning, and the other one is removing the tag at the end.
Correct. And so you really want, instead of barcoding where every single station, hey, barcode this when it gets here, barcode it when you start working on it, barcode it when it leaves, barcode when it gets to buffer, barcode when it gets picked up from buffer. If you're watching this video, you're probably already aware that that's not super easy to get everybody to do 100% of the time.
Yes, there are errors, there's missed barcodes.
Right.
It's so multiple extra steps all throughout the process.
So you think of this as a barcode. In fact, it has one on it, right? And so what you're doing is you're barcoding it at the beginning of that process, and then as it moves through, it does not ever need to be barcoded again. It's a constant, every few seconds, barcoding, giving you the exact XY of that position, right?
So to be clear, once you tag an item, it doesn't have to be scanned via barcode anymore as it goes to different stations.
It's it just goes and goes. So it's
just kind of like a continuous automated barcoding happening all the time.
Exactly. It's a real-time location system, right? So it's like you can think of it, like I've barcoded this once, I've attached it to a work order. That work order is going to move through, right?
Yeah.
And so we have one singular app, not multiple apps, not anything. It's one singular app. It works for Windows, it works for Mac, it works for Android, it works for Apple. You have two different screens, same app, two different screens. Load it up. You got one that you give to the people that are naming these. Right? That's the one behavioral change.
So at the beginning when they're doing the association of the material to the tag.
Exactly. So you don't want to look up CCD0. That means nothing to you. You want to look up work order 1, 2, 3, 4, shop order 1, 2, 3, 4, production order 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't know how many acronyms you guys can think of, but they're different for every single site. But whatever you call it, that's what you want this to be assigned to. So what we do is we give you an application, which we really should be showing right now, and we're not. But I'll do another video where I do that. And we basically scan this, scan your work order, if it has a barcode. Most shops do. If you don't, that's okay. Just type it in.
Then on the app, the software just marries it together, and now they're associated.
Now they're associated, right? So that's the behavioral change. Instead of scanning it in that it's going, you now scan this and that, and we give you a screen on the app to do that. Right. We even give a little camera so you can just hold up the paper if you wish to do that.
So that is really all you need to do on the outside. Any additional work is just that. But you also remove all the extra work of needing to physically barcode scan throughout the process.
Right. The hope is that you're eliminating a lot of additional things doing this, right? And one of the main things you're eliminating is the second use of that, right? So we're naming and associating, but why are we doing that? To go find things. Right. And so a lot of times you have a runner, expediter, whatever you want to call them. You've got people running around your facility making sure that...
Where in the world is this?
Yeah, or PMs, the production managers, right? So they need to make sure that you're running the right jobs at the right machines at the right time. And so they're running around with a clipboard making sure that things are where they are.
Or you have to make sure all of them are staged correctly before
shipment even, or before running. A lot of times you're only going to run this machine when you have enough material to run it, and you're going to get 10 jobs and put them all on that machine. It's a use case where you've got 9 out of the 10. Or a custom order comes in, it's a 10-piece order, I've got 9 sitting at shipping. Where is that 10th part? And I'm sure some people have the hair on the back of their neck is standing up listening to this, but we see it all the time. And so that comes in the case where there is the second window, same app, give it to the people naming stuff, you're going to use that application.
But now this has a map.
A map with dots, and then you go to the search bar and you type in work order, shop order 1, 2, 3, 4, enter, and then it just shows you where it is on the floor. Right. Of course, there's additional things. You can have different colors, and you can group them together and sort, so you could have different ones visible, and we give you a lot of those sort of kind of simple, out-of-the-box features with it. But we've made it to be very simple. The whole point is that it's usable day one. When we leave the site after setting it up with the calibration, which is about a 2-day process, you have a system at that point.
So you can kind of call it plug and play, right?
Sure. You still need IT buy-in. You're still going to run it on a VLAN. But yes.
You can have the system up and running by itself without any integration and still have your utility from the system.
Oh yeah. You're going to have apps that you can distribute. We don't charge per user, so give them to anybody that wants to find stuff and put this on anything you need to find. I've had shops do clipboards, ladders, just different bucket trucks that they need to find. It's really anything that you need to find. I'm talking about WIP and work orders because it tends to be common, but we have a lot of different sites tracking a lot of different things. So use the same app. You name it, and then you go find it. Right.
And then the last step of the simplification is you just have to make sure you remove the tag after the order is completed before it is shipped.
Right. And that same tag assignment screen that I talked about in the beginning of my rant is the same one you would use to disassociate. So you scan a tag, it preloads that it's already assigned to something, and I can click erase.
And do you have any comments on how our customers have received these instructions or guidance into changing their processes for workers?
In practice, the one big behavioral change is just at the beginning, making sure there's a bucket of tags at the beginning of whatever flow you're tracking, and that person knows that they need to scan, and place it with it, right? It's a pretty simple behavioral change, but it is one that they just need to follow, because if this doesn't go with it, you're not tracking anything. And that sounds so simple, but it truly, behavioral changes can be difficult. That's one of the main ones. And I have found in practice, a lot of shops don't even disassociate. They don't even really take it.
Oh, they don't have to worry about it because now it's just knocked out in their system, so they don't pay attention.
Exactly. It's already shipped. No one's searching for it anymore. So they really have a bucket of tags at the end. Sometimes it's a full circle, so they've got a bucket of tags that are ending. They just get shuffled right in. It's the same box. Others have a more linear flow where they have a receiving station and then a ship station's on the other side. But then basically every few weeks, you take a bucket of tags off the end and you bring them back to the beginning and just recycle. So in practice, you absolutely can have a disassociation step and you can have it discrete that you do that.
But you don't have to.
In practice, a lot of people are just going to scan this and then overwrite the last WIP that was associated to it, realistically. But yeah.
So the theme being here, simplification. We talked about installation. We talked about upkeep, and then this is the use.
Right.
The process that you workers follow on the floor. So that is just the beginning. Most certainly, the data that you capture as the WIP is moving around can be used for additional opportunities, like understanding, how utilized your equipment is. What's the process flow and how to optimize it. That is for a different conversation. But I just wanted to point out that. Yeah. This to get up and running, these are the very basic steps that you can follow, but there's very much more opportunity to take advantage of the system as well.
There's immediate ROI, right? The second we leave the site, you have screens and you can go find lost stuff. Done, right? And namely, it means not many more, if any, lost things in the plant. That's an immediate ROI use case, very simple, go track and find. We give you a screen for that. But what Seth is inferring, we'll discuss, I'm sure, in a later date, is that now you have location timestamps for all the material that's moving through your shop. You can do a lot to optimize your processes of knowing where things are. And that's really utilizing and taking and analyzing the data that you're generating is kind of a whole nother section of ROI that you can start to capitalize on once you've had the system running for a few weeks. Depending on your process, maybe even a few days. But you've got to get some full loops going. Once you do, that's really good data to have.
I was going to call this a mini podcast, but we're nearing 27 minutes, so I don't think we can call it a mini podcast.
Your mistake for inviting me. I'll talk all day.
So we'll invite Logan back for another period after he's done another round of site visits.
Sure.
And we'll talk about what the latest trend is at that point then. So for everyone, appreciate your time. Logan, any last words?
No. Thanks for watching if you've made it this far. Appreciate it. So thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.